right, another great day. On today's podcast, I am Seriously Me. These are my guests. Everybody can introduce themselves.
I'm DJ Superman from the Tough Talk Podcast.
Noah Schwaller.
And I'm Nick.
Nick's our very special guest today. And of course, I'm Seriously Me. Please like and subscribe for all the great content that will be coming your way. So today's question is it possible to be a modern day gentleman?
I guess the question would be, in that question, is it still a thing to be a gentleman with the way that the world thinks? And because there's always you always see the video of a guy holding the door open for a girl, and then she just goes through and then doesn't say anything. But you see them like, nope, come back, and then he'll go through or whatever. Like, is there still? Can you still be a gentleman in today's world?
So that is the question.
I mean, I think you can. I don't know. What do you think?
I think you can, but there is definitely some stipulations on it.
I mean, I think that's fair. And like, what kind of stipulations? Because like with the rise of modern feminism, right, which I would say is the antithesis of anything that is remotely chivalrous in nature. How would you go about that?
So, I think like you do have to adjust. So like what we thought of as gentlemen back in the day, you can't be. I think you can be a modern gentleman. There's different society standards, and can you open a door? Is that a nice thing to do? Sure. Can you be the person who pays on the date? Sure. Should you be the person who pays on the date? My opinion, maybe. I think there's a strong. I would advocate for it, but there is you're not dealing with the same side of the equation. So you said something about feminism. There has been a change in the culture and women, and you're not going to get. You're not going to get an old school lady. That's not what the expectation is nowadays, and maybe that's not what you want. But I think it is necessary to be a gentleman, especially in this day and age. And I think a gentleman is a very complicated statement.
Well, here's the thing, right? So if you aspire to say a gentleman or a modern day gentleman, however you look at it, why would you settle for anything less than a lady?
Well, I think you can get a modern day lady.
But what does that look like exactly? Because, all right, so
not a modern girl.
Huh?
Not a modern girl.
Fair enough. But we really have to break down what that looks like. Because like something that is still very prevalent today is everybody knows. Like it is across the board. You might have a few people who are okay with Dutch or halfsies or whatever you want to call it, But on average, the man in any aspect is going to be expected to pay for the date, especially the first date. And I would argue that if you're a man and you're not paying for the first date, then you have no business being where you're at. Like just plain and simple. If you endeavor to have a quality woman in your life, she's going to have certain expectations of you, as well as you should have certain expectations of her.
Yeah.
And if you go into that date and you feel put off and disrespected, like this lady's here for the food, then she's obviously not warranted your time.
Reasonable.
You say stuff about expectations, but the thing is how can we, use our expectation of a woman? Because in modern day society, bringing that up on a date, like say, what can you do for me extra during a relationship? You can't really do that in today's society with certain people, because then you'll be looking at as like say misogynistic or something.
Yeah, I was gonna say the same
that's
thing.
That's a great point. I would say that in that instance, this is a person who's not deserving of your time. Because if a person, they believe that the playing field is theirs to own, there's no room to grow. There's no room to improve, and what are you looking at? You are looking at a modern day dictatorship, quote unquote, kind of metaphorically. you don't want to be in a position where you're like, well, nothing I think or, of like what I would like matters. Therefore, really, where's like, we're not looking at a misogyny, I think, in that case. I think we're looking at misandry, which, if you don't know, misandry is the hate of men. So a lot of misogyny, a lot of women can't tell you, modern day, like can't even, and guys, like like younger generation can't even tell you the definition of misogyny. They're just like, well, it means this or it means that. Well, you can't probably know. It literally means the hate of. And I've maybe met, I can't even think of specifically right now, an actual male who hated women. Now, I've met men who disrespected women. We didn't tolerate them. But the actual hatred of a woman is not prevalent. Like, they want you to think it's out there, but it really, in large, is not. Men might have, trouble focusing how they love women, but generally all men, love women. And I'd like to hear your thoughts on it.
I mean, most men have an appreciation for women. I think, I think people fail to realize that like you can have like an appreciation for art and you can recognize the beauty of the art, and that's what a lot of men, because us being visual, represent women like in our head. That's how the story kind of plays out in our head. Is that women are art. That doesn't mean they're something that they're not property, which is like they're like, oh, you want to own them. I'm like, no, but I want to be in a relationship with them, and it's really it's just really hard because like I felt like during my generation, and I don't know about you, but like growing up, it was like you were taught to be a nice guy, and I learned that that's not what gets you a lady. It's not what gets you a woman. That's not what gets you a girl in the first place.
Yeah, it doesn't
let
get you
alone
anywhere.
a woman, let alone a lady.
I agree.
And I think it's important that a man understands the difference between a girl, a woman, and a lady.
That's true.
And I think most men are taught to be nice guys because you should be a nice guy to your mom. You should have respect for your mother, right?
Yeah, I think that's when you graduate from boyhood to manhood. There's a transition that needs to happen there, and I think a lot of young men aren't transitioning. Like, you can absolutely be a good man without being a nice guy. Like, there should always be the like there's this common like thing that's really popular: F around and find out. Now, I'm not advocating wrecking anybody's world when they quote unquote F around or whatever, but there has to be that sense that there is consequences for violating your standards, your parameters, what you value as a moral code, and women respect that, and other men respect that. And if you don't develop that, people will both men and women will walk over you.
I think that's important. So I have a question. You, growing up, what were you taught? Like, what is a gentleman to you? Like, how you perceive it? And how has that played out in your dating life?
Well, I can tell you it played out in my dating life pretty crappy, but
Okay.
I would say being kind to everybody, respecting everybody, and helping out and doing whenever you can. I mean, I've always been a person as always gave my the shirt off my back to anybody who needed it, and that really has never played out well for me.
See, and I can jump onto that. So, for me, like I watched people older than me, family or whatever, essentially give their shirt off their back, try and be generous, try and do the good thing and all that. And I was just like, seems like a bad business deal to me. Like, it seems like a bad arrangement. Where's the profit? And like, people are like, well, you don't have to get money. I'm like, no, but you have to profit. And like, I think the biggest failure of anybody teaching business is to think that money is the profit. That's not what profiting is. Everything has a value. Everything has a value.
Now,
Of some variation.
could you say a profit could be like, say, self-satisfaction?
To an extent, yeah, that has value. The value is limited though, and it's hard to. So part of profit helps you to. So one way it could be a profit is, say that self-satisfaction motivates you to do it again, and you have the resources to do the activity again. Bam, profit again, right? So profit should lead you to more profit. And whatever you gain out of the circumstance, somebody else has to gain something, right? That allows them to profit again, right? So that's a good business deal.
Mutual growth.
Yeah, so both people are growing, right? So if you have the resources to profit from self-satisfaction, which motivates you to do it again, that is profit. But if you get self-satisfaction for a time being, but you squandered resources, that does not allow you to do that again so you can profit again, are you profiting? That's a good question. I don't think you're profiting.
No, you're not. You're taking it at a loss. Something to think about though is because a lot of people, like especially no offense, younger generations, they focus a lot more. I'd say even mine seems to be focused a lot on it, on on happiness. Now a lot of people or satisfaction or whatever. A lot of people fail to realize that you need fulfillment in your life, right?
These young whippersnappers and their phones.
It's completely fine. It's the day and age we live in.
True.
But you should always be looking for fulfillment. If you don't have fulfillment, happiness comes and goes. That's the reason why, in today's, a thing you hear a lot is, well, I just wasn't happy anymore. Well, you're never going to be happy all the time.
True.
I once heard a great discussion between Jordan Peterson and another scholar, and I forget, it escapes me what his name is right now, but one thing they spoke about and agreed upon is that happiness is kind of like a small miracle, right? When it transpires, it's great, but it's always fleeting. So if you base a relationship or anything you do on happiness, you may find yourself wanting, or it's pretty much inevitable that you'll find yourself wanting. You'll be like, where's that happy?
You have to literally be a miracle worker.
Yeah.
To maintain that level.
Whereas if you focus on fulfillment, as long as you keep doing what fulfills you, you will always have that.
Yeah. I mean, so going back to finish off right there is so you do get value. Don't mistake me when I say you're not profiting. You got value. You got value out of the transaction, but as he stated, at a loss. If the value is not greater than the resources given, So I think that's important to hold, and I think that also for younger men is a good thing to measure because we are mechanically oriented typically. Now that's not always 100% or even a large 90% ratio, but men are typically mechanically oriented in how they think and how their logic processes. Yeah, how their logic processes. And it is maybe sometimes look at it from the perspective, all right, I want to build a castle. If I invite you onto my land to help me build a castle, are you going to help me put it brick by brick? Are we going to put bricks down together? Or are you going to watch me build the castle and then live in it without any work put into it? That doesn't seem like a very reward-based relationship. And I think if we could maybe explore distinguishing between a nice guy and a good man, or maybe expanding to see what a gentleman would be, because I think a good man is a gentleman. I think they're intertwined. I think that's the same thing. I could be mistaken, but I think why would I think the perception is that you have to give, and that's what makes you a good man. But, you will run out of resources emotionally or physically, We're not endless pools of emotional resilience, though we try to be. I think you should be robust mentally, but, all of us have a threshold that we cannot cross. And I think finding the threshold that should not be crossed, what the expectation and what kind of woman meets those criteria. Because you don't have to demand anything of anyone but yourself. And you should demand that I need this to progress my life forwards. If the criteria that progresses your life forwards are not being met met and you're being quagmired, or worse, brought backwards, you know, then you're probably in the wrong. You're probably in the wrong relationship or pursuing the wrong thing. Now, don't get me wrong. So part of what makes being a modern day gentleman hard, you know, is the promiscuous end of our society, you know, and how do I phrase this as a gentleman? Like, I think that's okay. I think you can have a promiscuous side to society. But if that's all there is that is being offered, like say a woman's like, hey, I'm hot, you know, I want you to pay for this, I want you to pay for that, I want you to open the door, I want you to do all these things. They're like, well, yeah, but you're only giving me this. You're only giving me this one thing, you know. That's okay, but make sure you have your boundaries input that like controls that situation. Because at a certain point, you know, be okay. You have to understand like what is the relationship. It doesn't make you not a gentleman to understand that you're getting this value, this one specific value, and that's it. That's fine if that's all she wants to offer. You know, if that's all she has to offer, that's also fine, but that's probably not what you want to invest into. Because how would you get your return on investment?
Well,
I was thinking, just leading off of that, because that was like actually dipping into what I was going to bring up.
Sure.
Was like, what is the perceived notion of what a gentleman is? In that instance, for that person, it may be he's going to buy me this, he's going to do this for me, I'm going to sit here, look pretty or whatever, I'm going to do my hand like this because that's whatever they want to do, whatever, when they talk like that. And it's just like, like what is the trade of value that you're giving me? Like, okay, you're pretty and you're doing that or whatever, but like, what are you bringing to the table? Like another instance, like there's like millions of gym videos of gentlemen just being gentlemen in the gym, whether they're like asking to use the equipment,
being chastised for it,
or just, you know, trying to like find their way to like an area to where they can work out, and they might just do like a little quick glance, but oh my goodness, they glanced and now they're, you know, harassing me at the gym or whatever, and it's just like, what are you talking about? Like,
okay, so I do want to, I have a strong opinion on that, because I appreciate, you know, as a mechanical, business-oriented person that is driven, I can appreciate art. And I'm sorry, if you have a legit work of art in front of you, appreciate it. You don't have to goggle.
Right.
Like, you don't have to be standing there, like, you know, like undressing with your eyes. But I mean, like, there's one thing I found out. So so makeup is an art form. You know, singing is an art form. You know, like dressing yourself is an art form. Like I thought, I was like, man, how do they look so cool? How did they do this? And I realized they got like 10 different items on. I didn't know a shirt had that many parts. I didn't know there was that many colors of purple. And you know what? If you're going to the work to, first off, if this is at the gym, first off, you're going to the gym to work out, to perfect art. You're sculpting a statue of a work of art, of like Da Vinci oriented like caliber beauty. Appreciate it. Men should appreciate that. Now, appreciation and taking advantage of something are very different. You know, all right, society needs to clarify where those lines are. Where are those lines? I don't think anyone really knows. And I think it's also subjectively based on how attractive the guy is, or
It is
unattractive,
100%.
you know, the guy is. So yeah, you basically can do the exact same thing as a 6'6", you know, muscle bound, you know, like beautiful, like diamond-eyed guy looking around, and you just like an average Joe, and you the creepy one. You know, I'm just saying. Is that fair? No. So maybe society needs to get their lines drawn. But
Well, I would argue that they have drawn their lines. I would say that the feminist movement it's whatever the woman in the moment decrees it is. But that's not, like, that right there will tell you, like, and I don't agree with it, you know. I've never like been like, oh, you know, go ahead, I'll go away, do whatever you're doing. But, you know, women, you know, like you said, they are beautiful. They are something to be appreciated. And if you look, it's something that happened. I've never known a man who is, you know, he's like, you'll see guys like there who are like with their significant others who are like this because they know if they go that direction, they're going to look, you know, so they're avidly attempting not to, to not be disrespectful. But the thing is, you know, regardless, these women who are out there chastising men in gyms are not ladies, and they don't deserve to be even acknowledged, in my opinion, because a lady should never be, just like a gentleman, should never be lacking in zeal. That means like the charisma and goodwill that is they personified to humanity in general, right? Now, all people deserve a baseline of respect, whether you're a man or a woman, you know, unless you prove yourself unworthy of the baseline humanity of respect. Like if somebody comes up and mugs you, guess what? They have like voided themselves from the baseline of respect. However, people who can act with zeal and confidence, you know, say like a guy across the gym has noticed that you are wearing, you know, like your yoga pants or whatever, and like all your assets are showing, you know, or whatever, like he's across the gym. Like, you need to react in a way that proves that you are less than confident in yourself. No, you go about your business, you know, and he goes about his more times than not.
I've never heard of an artist who thought it was disrespectful for you to stare at their art too long. I've never heard of that. Like, I get it. Like, I get the social dynamic. They like, hey, maybe you shouldn't stare too long. And, you know, like, it's not like I'm, like, peeking around the corner to be like, look at that go. You know, like, that is bubbly bodacious. You know, I'm just saying, like, can you imagine, like, I don't know, like, whatever God you have in your mind, if, like, do you think he's taking or she's taking events to, like, some guy being like, man, that's a work of art. That is a work of art. You know, I'd be like, yeah, that's my work of art. I made that. You're right. You know, and, like, why are you going to the gym?
It's
like, obviously you want to be healthy.
It's kind of like women who get like really up in arms about getting catcalled. Most men, I know, I can't speak for all men, but most men would be like, please catcall me. Let me know I'm still relevant, and I'm not like, you know, I'm still sexually relevant, not a lamp or something. Like, you know, when like you walk through the street, and most men are lamps. They're like, women treat them as non-sexual objects. You know, and like men would just kill for like, please, one cat call, somebody pinch my ass, please. You know,
you know, like you know every guy. If some guys like, hey, you got a nice rump, you know, across the gym, they'd be like, I'm gonna do 10 more squats, yeah. You know, yeah, it's a different response. Now I do understand we have different mentalities, and you have to be respectful of like the dynamic and biological and like social and like psychological differences between male female. Like, you got to be respectful of that because we don't think the same. You know, there are like, there's like a spectrum of differences. Some women overlap into how men think. Some men overlap into how women think. Yada yada yada.
I think that's a product of our age because I don't think in most cases that there should be an overlap. I think men have a way of, you know, like there is some amount of, yes, effeminate or masculinity, like or masculine behavior that can overlap some. But I think one of the problems in this day and age is like you constantly see like TikTok video after TikTok video. Where have all the good men gone? Or the real men? That's a popular. And where are the real men? I'm like, the real like you should know like that's the thing. I think we've lost focus.
I mean, maybe they're appreciating art somewhere else.
You know,
like,
it could be. I mean,
the painter came out and was like, "Stop staring at my art!" Slap, slap. You know, like okay, I'm going over to this one.
I think a good example, like in the manosphere or red pill community, there's a lot of guys out there who are all telling you this is what a man should be, and unfortunately, you know, I think it's great, like, you know, there are people out there who are telling men to improve or whatever, but I think, like, where you go, they're like, all men should be this way. Like, you know, like, to be a successful man, you need to be, like, you know, one of the big things is, like, oh, you know, promiscuity among males, that's okay. Like, you can just, you know, go, like, buckshot your seed as much as you like, you know, that's part of being a male.
But a woman should just only stay with you.
And just stay with you. I'm like, biologically there are double standards, right? So in biology we are not equal. We have differences. We are separate. But I think as a society, there should be less double standard. I'm not saying you're going to erase biology, but I think like if you want a woman, say, who has a lower body count, then you yourself have to hold yourself to similar standards. You can't expect to play the field with your promiscuity, and then like be like, oh no, you can't do that. Now there is a difference between men and women, how they view relationships, how they're biologically wired, but I think it is better for society when people hold certain moral boundaries.
Well, can you have the promiscuity with holding certain moral boundaries? I don't know how to put it, but I think you can be. Well, I mean, I think there's a limit. I do think there's a limit. I think there's a certain point where you go overboard and it kind of diminishes any possible relationship you can get. But then again, there's the argument that it increases relationship, because if you get so much physical attention, then the physical attention will be boring, and you require your relationship is strictly based on emotional attention, and you should be looking for a lady that adds value emotionally overall, so like, I mean, I don't necessarily agree. I don't think we should go back to like shun anyone who's had more than one.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying like if you demand something of a woman, right? Like you have standards, right? Mm-hmm. So that's the big thing. There's this pushback against male standards, right? Mm-hmm. And it's become a huge talking point, like, all over the internet, like men have the right to have standards, and there's really big pushback from the feminist movement, be like, no, women's standards are basically, they're the go-to or whatever. I think it's important for both men and women to have standards, but the thing is, men should be looking for the standards that, like, the expression is a two-way street, right? Like, women in large are looking for the one-way street. They want to have the standards without putting the onus on themselves. And as a man, we know like what's required of us, right? So I think, and what I was saying is, like, in the red pill community, I think there's a little bit of like, they like to embrace the double standard more. And I'm not saying there's not like truth to it or where, like, say there was a guy I was watching a podcast the other week. He has 4 long-term relationships with 4 different women. He supports all of those women, and they are okay with this. I do not begrudge him this. Could you consider this promiscuity? I wouldn't say so, because he, like, these are committed relationships that he has and that he financially supports. I would not consider that promiscuity. Is it something I'd want for myself? Probably not, but, promiscuity is relationships without attachment. It is giving things without proper due diligence. That's promiscuity, and that's something we should avoid all costs as a society.
Okay, so going off that, so due diligence, yes, I agree. So I think, all right, say if the relationship, is a short-term relationship, or however long-term it might be, but there is only physical attributes on the table,
You should have been in the first place.
Yeah. I think you can have a non-committed relationship in that endeavor and still have a gentleman's romance about it. So one of the things that I think sets gentlemen apart is that they're different than players. They're different than the man playing the game. Mm-hmm. You can be in the game, if you want to call it that. You can be there dealing out cards, but you keep a certain amount of decorum about you in the endeavor, and you have to have this line of like, well, if this is all it is, that's all it is. I will have my standards. You conduct yourself in a manner that you can have romance in that type of relationship. And I have met ladies that were like, what? Like, I threw them a back because I was like, yes, this is fine, but these are my standards for myself, and I'm different. I'm not gonna play into this. Like, I'm not gonna manipulate your feelings. That's not what I'm here for. Like, I'm going. Like, we understand we're adults. We're going about our life how we want to go about our life. But like if you want to get to the utmost level of a good relationship, that requires commitment, due diligence, and there has to be more on the table. And the man, even if women are like, hey, this is red flag, you don't have to voice your standards out loud to everybody to hear, but you have to know them, and the people who need to hear them are who you get to say them to, because you will meet somebody who meets these standards and requirements. You just have to figure out what they are, and are they healthy? If they're healthy and they make you progress into the future as a man with drive, that's good. If they don't, you need to reevaluate your standards, right? So, if you're meeting, like, you might have to work with somebody, right? You might have to evolve a relationship from a basic relationship,
Well,
but like, they don't get X until they have given X. So if you have standards that, like, hey, if you want to be in this level of a relationship, you can have a relationship here, you can have it here, you can have it like rudimentary,
I think we have to be very careful with that, because like, that's how so many men never entertain the friend zone. Never. Like, I kind of like the friend zone sometimes. But I mean, I think we're talking about different friend zones. Yeah, no, I don't think we're talking about the same thing. Like, never entertain the friend zone. You will nothing, if you are not a sexual option from the get-go, you will never be a sexual option. No amount of, I brought you flowers, I comforted you when this other guy dicked you over, will ever get you to the next point. You are doing yourself and your resources a disservice. So I think we have to be very careful when we talk about evolving a relationship. Also, women who think they can build a bum, don't do it. A bum is a bum. No build a bums. Like, just,
well, no matter what, you shouldn't go into any relationship looking to fix a person or change a person.
Only people can change themselves.
Or, well, it still stems off elevate, but elevate or help push them, sure. If it's still them as their own being in person elevating, great. But if you're trying to change that into something that you want, no, never.
Yeah, it has to be there in the first place.
They don't get. Yeah, you don't give away X if the criteria for X hasn't been met.
I would say you can change somebody, but it shouldn't be something that you want to do for yourself. It should be something that you'd want to do for that person.
So I think,
unfortunately, that's you. You can't change anybody. Like, I've learned in my experience being the oldest person on the panel, not the swinging around or anything or whatnot.
Old man.
Quiet you. Is like something you'll find out in life is like we are actually innately think we can improve. Like, especially as men, we're fixers. We're like, if it's broken, god damn it, we can fix it. But that's actually the truth is, like, other people are usually resistant to being fixed or whatever whatnot. They can only fix themselves. Like, if somebody in my youth told me, be like, hey, you're going about it all the wrong way, I'd probably be like, nah. I have to make the choice for myself to, like, change things. Being told to do it, like, without, like, some sort of external force will never enable a person to actually make meaningful and lasting change.
No matter what you do, they have to earn their own answer. That was a hard thing. That was probably one of the most, like, revolutionary things I've ever heard. And I know it sounds dumb, like, because people say you can't change somebody, right? And to some extent, you can influence people. You can. And
100%,
I do believe that.
yes.
But, like, the individual has to earn the answer. And that's hard for me to describe because I'm not a psychologist, but essentially, like, if you give them the answer, you've given them something. Just like as if you give a kid too much, they will become spoiled, but they appreciate what they've earned. So for whatever reason, and I don't understand the psychology behind it, but for whatever reason, advice has to be earned in some measure for it to be taken. That's why they say good advice is oftenly wasted,
That's because they're not receptive to hearing in the first place. So
they have to earn it.
Yeah, so when somebody looks to earn something, that means they actually want it. And when you want something, you take it in. And if you're just given something, you might not have wanted it in the first place. Like a bum on the street can give me a profound statement. Now, if I'm in the state of mind that that's a bum, and I'm probably not receiving it, right? Like the average person, like me, I have the belief that all people, even the most wrong people, will sometimes say very profound things. So I'm always listening. But the average person, like, did you know in psychology that one of the most prominent things that they hear is that people aren't hearing them, like they're not heard. Like that is one of the greatest contributors to depression and anxiety. They're like, nobody hears me. And it's because like the majority of the world isn't going, they're not vying for that. Like they don't want to earn the advice or necessarily the knowledge. They just want it given to them. They're like, give it to me. And that way it's disposable. Like we live in a consumerist world where everything's disposable, but it's much different. It's like a kid, like you were talking about, with like when they're giving something, not respecting it. Like if you give, like there was this young man, he was given a brand new Mustang, right?
Okay,
it was
me.
you know, brand new Mustang. He got this. Now he didn't work for this. It was just you've made it through high school. Congratulations. Here's a brand new Mustang. He totaled it 3 days after his graduation. Totaled it. Why? Because he didn't respect it. He didn't work for it. He didn't know, he got something that was more than he could handle, and he didn't respect it. You have to earn, and as men, we're always trying to earn our next place in the world.
Oh yeah.
And that's something we have to understand, that it has to, it applies to everything you do in your life. You have to earn it and respect it.
So I have a question. Some of your interactions with
gotta never be too safe.
Females, because you're the youngest in this group. So females in your day and age, because I'll put it this way: growing up, my dynamic with females in older life versus younger life is vastly different. So, and I'm curious, what is your dating scenario kind of like to me, the perception is, and I gather this from what I hear, we'll say the internet or whatever, but there's real world experience to this, but it seems like that if you state, hey, here's my boundary, that's a red flag for a woman. If you have boundaries.
Yeah.
That's the perception given. But I've found most of the women I respect, if you assert a boundary that is a respectable boundary, and you're not they'd use the term misogynistic, but if you do it in a manner of this is my boundary. This is not an ultimatum. This is a repercussion for if this criteria is not met. That. Typically, most of the women that I've respected find that actually relatively attractive, which I don't understand. Me telling them no is attractive, I don't understand how that pans out. But
it's biological, because everybody, so the whole world at some point is going to shit test you. They're just going to be like, what can we get away? It's like a child, right? Not that women are children, but the world is like a child. They are, and the whole world at some point is going to be like, what can we get away with, right? And the thing, women are biologically, they're going to find it more attractive, a man who can say no. It's all right, someone we know was talking about how they will ask in the middle of the night for some water that they could get up and get themselves. Now, I've heard this from multiple, not just this particular person, but I've actually heard a multiple, and it's something a woman does. They fully unadmitted to it, not because they couldn't do it from themselves, but they want to see if they can get their man to do it. And that's a small thing. And when you're no, they're oh, just checking, making sure you still got the pants in the relationship. It's their way of, it's taking the temperature of the relationship. If you're you're well, I'm just gonna bring you the water every time you can't get you off your ass and get it. You'd be it'd be
Well, I'll play the devil's advocate. Isn't that part of being a gentleman? Doing things for your lady.
I think it's thinking in the sense of, this is my line, that even that one little thing, I refuse to do it just because you are also able to do it yourself.
Yeah,
That's
it's
what I-
it's,
that's what I
it's
So I think you have
that,
to
that's
weigh,
where like the gentleman gets skewed into what like because a thing that a woman won't respect. You become the nice guy gentleman, and you're like, it's not the difference. It's like, say one morning you bring your woman breakfast in bed. She's obviously earned that breakfast in bed. You know, like you're doing a nice thing to her. But if you guys are like going to bed and you're like already in bed and she knows that she, you know, like you got to go to work or whatever, and she's like, man, I really want some water. You're not being a gentleman. You're letting somebody take advantage of you. There's a difference. You can politely be like, oh, you can, you know, like you're more than capable of getting yourself, roll over and go to bed or whatever, you know. But that woman is going to lose respect from you if you go up and get her the water. Now, if she's sick or something, you know,
you go up and get it every time.
yeah, like
think-
it
I
has
think-
to. It's the difference between like a courtesy that was earned versus a courtesy that is being demanded without warrant. Like, I'm sorry, I'm going to bed. You get your ass. You go get it. Like, if I
what if we slide in there? Hey, would you like for me to get that for you? Without her implying that she's looking for you to get it, then
that's different. It's something you
man.
did of your own volition, but you also have to be very like careful because she's not demanding of you. Like if you've given something out of your own volition, like, you know, that's a different story, but you also have to be careful that it's balanced because, like, again, something that is given will not be appreciated as something that is earned, right? So you like if you
Oh, so you're giving gifts earned.
yeah.
Is that a
yeah,
good way?
it's like,
of
all
putting
right,
it?
so say I take like a lot of women are like, there's a very prominent YouTuber, social media, whatever, I forget what her name is, Coco or something of the like or whatever, who was like, yeah, no coffee dates. Yeah, no coffee dates. She
I
was
like
like,
coffee. What do
yeah,
you mean?
she's like, no coffee dates. Like that man is not in your caliber. Do not do coffee dates.
did she
And-
watch too much Luke Cage? 'Cause I'm
I-
trying to understand.
Oh.
Coffee dates.
But my thing is like, well, did you earn like the Michelin star restaurant? Like that?
What's
like
the-
that's a legit question. Did
What's the criteria? Like,
did
alright,
my
so-
encounter with you tell me you're a woman that I would take out to like, you know, like $100 a plate restaurant, so on, whatever, you know, like
Oh,
that.
okay.
That's the thing.
So yeah, all right. So hold on, wait a minute. All right, if this YouTuber can't go around saying, all right, if you're what's the
Oh, she
equivalent-
absolutely did.
What's
She-
the equivalent of a deadbeat man, like a bum of a man and a woman? Like if you're just some average Joe
Oh,
woman.
I just wanted to be like a woman, but no, I'm just kidding.
So no, like if
Like,
you're
shots
just-
fired.
All right, if you put yourself in a position, and if I interact with you, I don't want to take you out on dates. Say I'm like next woman, I want to take this man out on a date. I'm like, oh my goodness, like, all right, we're having an interaction, and you tell me,
This
hey,
went away.
I worked 60 hours this week. You know, I did X, Y, and Z. You know, blah blah blah. I'm like, you know, like in my head, I'm tallying up like credits in
Yep.
my head. Like I'm like, you know, like, and there's a certain level of like when I'm interacting with a lady that I'm like, nah, you don't get a coffee date. You don't get like, you know, like you don't get like the McDonald's date. You don't like we're going out nice. You know, I'm gonna give you a good time, and I will spend that endeavor, you know, whatever resources it requires, in the hopes of catching your attention, you know, because I think that there is potential, and you know, like when you're investing in things, there's risk reward, right?
Yeah.
You know, all investment have a certain amount of risk at the initial beginning, and you can, but I mean, you calculate, like men are calculating. I think they should be, anyways. They're calculating their risk factor in their initial investment. And I'm
100%.
sorry, you know, like the average person doesn't go above a coffee date, and like I think
Well,
that's a very lax way to. That's a very easy way to get to know each other. You
Well,
know,
she's
aside
always
from the
talking
caffeine
about
making you jittery.
like women should improve themselves, and I think both men and women should improve themselves. But here's the thing: you have to, like, so if you take that stance, right, like no coffee dates, right? Like if you take that stance, you have to make sure you're worth that, you know,
That
like
caliber.
that caliber of date, right?
If you're above
And,
coffee date,
you know,
like
if I go out and I am out there and I just, run into, some lady, I'm wearing t-shirt and jeans and so on. Is she gonna think that I'm the caliber of date? Like, she's like, is this a guy who's gonna take me to she's gonna make judgments based on that, right? Based on my appearance, dress, and how I carry myself or whatever.
Yeah.
You have to make sure, like, as a lady, that you're personifying, being like, I'm worth this dinner, like charming, lots of zeal, like, like putting yourself like where people can say, that's a lady I'd like to take out to a restaurant, and I'd be willing to spend X, Y, and Z on her. And that's probably something as a lady that she's not necessarily expecting you to. She's expecting you to supply her with a good, time, but she's not necessarily, expecting, you need to take me out to, a really high-end restaurant for our first date. Like the difference is like she knows her quality, right?
Yeah.
But she's not demanding it yet.
Oh. Yeah, no, that's a thing to consider. Sorry.
No, I don't know.
So you can't be too presumptuous. If you know your worth, that's fine.
But the other person doesn't.
You have to establish that worth with the other individual. They're working without that knowledge, right?
Yeah. So there has to be a baseline, and then like once that person sees, like okay, this is what I'm dealing with.
And a lot of dating is online, is it? Is it not?
Yeah,
like, do you go out to bars and get drinks with girls?
Well, I'm gonna say personally, I don't like going out to bars that much. But
all right, fair enough.
That's fair.
It's funny how you guys are bringing this up because I literally just had this happen to me not too long ago. I was on a dating app and I matched with a pretty woman. And we didn't really have too much long of a conversation, but she immediately went to, well, let's go to this expensive restaurant. Now, I looked up the expensive restaurant because I had no clue what it was. So I looked it up, and I saw that a plate for that restaurant was $109 a piece. And that's just for one plate. Crazy. And now, mind this, we didn't really have that much of a conversation. And it's like...
Yeah, she hadn't established that she was of the value of that restaurant.
Yeah, the priority.
That's engagement dinner. Like, what?
See, all right,
see, me,
that's
exactly
out here
how I see
asking
it.
for $100 plates
bamboozled
on a
into
regular
that,
date.
but-
What?
You would not believe like that is like a go-to these days.
But listen, the audacity of it is whenever I said I'd rather not spend that much money on a first date, would you rather go on a hike and get to know each other first? I got blocked. Ain't that something?
Wow, she went all out. She was like, boop,
Look,
damn.
So, all
that
right.
is not you. Trust me. Like, you are, man.
Yeah, like,
I mean,
What the
like,
hell?
okay.
See, I know better than that because, like this whole conversation's about. I know my worth whenever it comes to stuff like that because I'm not. Which I've had it happen before because in my generation, it's pretty much all hookup culture. I have yet to find anybody who is like wanted to even try to even get to know somebody. And like me, I'm a person that I like to get to know people, even like friends, relationships. Like it doesn't matter. I like to get to know the people that I'm with
You wanna
instead
know
of
what you're
just
investing
jumping
in.
right into it. Like
I
You
mean,
need to date older. That's what that is.
get your
Yeah,
coup.
because the people in your age group is like on a whole nother like something right now. I don't know what's going
Well,
on.
I mean, I think we can.
I don't know. You have to be careful with that because, like, it depends what you're looking for. Like, one of the things I find, like, in my age range is you have a lot of jaded individuals. Like, they've been
On
through.
both sides.
Yeah. They've been through whatever they've been through, and they're absolutely gonna tax you with it. Like, it is the previous relationship tax. Yeah. Like, you cannot bring whatever happened to you in whatever past relationship and put it on that person. Yeah. Like,
they
It's
had no
no say, nothing to do with it.
You can learn from a past. I think so. Like, my thing is, like, I think people take like traumatic experience from a past relationship but not learning experience. Those are very different
Well, that's because
mindsets.
we're men. Like, there's a difference.
Well, I mean,
like, for us, we like. How did we take? Like, we take the L. Like, what did we do? Like, it's a failure, right? Whereas, like everybody every woman has a toxic ex. Everybody. They're like, that man was toxic. Like, every woman has a... I'm like, okay, well, what else? You know, like, I mean, was it, like, there's no, like, for me, like, any failed relationship, I'd be like, I can't worry about what the other person did wrong. That doesn't help me any. Be like, what did I do wrong? Like, from the get-go, be like, did I not properly vet this person? Did I not find out that, you know, like, things that would, you know, red flags, did I not pay attention? You know, I can only focus on me, whereas, like, I feel like on the opposite end of the spectrum, like, the absence of responsibility is, like, what's paramount. Be like, no, like, this person did this thing wrong, that thing wrong.
Well,
you can't control what another person does. Only yourself.
There is relationships that what you did wrong was be in them. There is
but that's
those
it.
are relationships.
That's what you need to focus on.
But that is not statistically possible for that to be every relationship. I just don't. There's no way. There's no way that's statistically possible. So
No,
I think that is a conundrum that a lot of women betray, to me at least. You know, in like on the internet and like across the board, like a lot of personas are like, you know, like what I did wrong in the relationship is even date that guy. Like I can't believe I would lower myself, and I'm like, well, hold on. You think that's the only thing you did wrong in the relationship? And yes, that can be the case, but I would say that is that's so rare. Come on, let's be honest here. And like, even the relationships that's part of what I did wrong was be in the relationship.
Yeah. Well,
I progressed things and did those things wrong in the relationship. So you can't exclude those. And I think when you take the stance that, well, what I did wrong in the relationship was be with that despicable individual, you're removing your obligation of what you did wrong in that relationship. You know, like, I mean, and you're assuming the best of yourself. And in my experience,
unfortunately, like, people lack introspection. Like, they don't want to, because it can be hard and damaging, like, to all facets of your world, because the worst lies you can tell are the ones you tell to yourself. Be like, well,
Sure.
You know, I'm not responsible for what happened. You know, like in the
Mr.
relationship.
Perfect.
You know, yeah, like you like
I've never
even
made.
if you weren't the one who did necessarily say the other person like cheated. As men, you're a cheater. As women, well, why?
Yeah.
All right.
Um,
So there's a truth all the above, but like how it's perceived is differently. But we have to know. You have to do the due diligence, and you can't just be like, well, you know, I was not emotionally connecting or whatever. Well, did you say anything? Did you talk about it? Did you like actually converse? Like you can't just be like, you're not emotionally connecting with me, and the guy's like, WTF? Didn't know I wasn't.
You know, there is one thing that I have noticed throughout a lot of it is a lot of people don't like to take their time to understand what happened. They don't like to take the time to be alone for, so like, say the remainder of like a couple months after the relationship. They always want to jump into the next one. So instead of dealing with that trauma and understanding like what happened, they just jump into the next relationship and just throw all that baggage on the next person. At least that's how I've been seeing a lot of it lately.
Yeah, I think there's something to that, you know.
You don't. There's probably, if you were in a relationship that you're very committed to, there's probably definitely time frames to heal.
It's like
you know, that can.
I would say it's like
you
Of
can
course,
heal
that
in a
begs
day. Sometimes the
being
next
alone.
relationship
So that begs
heal.
the question: what does healing look like? I actually heard this asked on another podcast because a lot of, you know, sorry ladies, I'm not trying to rag on you, but we're dudes, you know, so our side of the spectrum is looking across the way. So, but it was a lady who asked this. She's like, what does healing look like? Because they say a lot of ladies talk about, especially, you know, now granted this is on the internet, so this is the ones who are being publicized. They're like, oh, well, I had to take time out for me to heal and so on and so. But what does that look like? Because a lot of times when men hear like women took time out for themselves, you know, it's not how the women are perceiving it. Be like, well, I did all these things, you know, I did yoga, I meditated, whatever, to do their healing or whatever. And the man's just hearing, it's like, it all sounds like BS to me. I mean, what changes did you make? You know, because like all they hear, like as guys, is you took out more time for you. I mean, isn't
Like
that
a
what you were
vacation.
doing in the relationship in the first place? Was taking time out for you?
So yeah, like if you have a selfish nature and your version of I need to heal is to be more selfish, and maybe that was
Yeah,
part
the
of
self-love.
You know, like maybe that was part of the criteria. I think for men, healing is confidence. I think if your confidence is good, because I agree with you on the facet of we take the L, you know, and like to expand upon that, like, you know, a lot of times a man is going to look at I failed.
Yeah.
Like in most endeavors,
How and why did I fail?
if the end goal is not achieved, the man is assuming that he failed, and that is true in some measure, in almost all cases. In some measure, you failed at some point in some way, you know, and figuring out what that is important. And I think part of healing is that confidence. I think one of the greatest flaws, and I think going back to gentlemen, I think you can like the difference between a gentleman and a narcissist is competence and peacocking. You know. So if you're a competent man, earn to be competent, to have a certain level that you can conduct yourself in a gentleman way. Now, I'm not saying hold yourself back because you haven't reached a level. You know, you want to progress yourself, so drive yourself and put yourself in positions that you think other people would be in if you can be greater. But rewinding it back a little bit, like a narcissist is going to give the illusion of competence, you know, out of their arrogance. So that's arrogance, not competence. And you know, like, so they have like what do you call it? Like artificial confidence.
Well, the thing is, like, so narcissism is actually a lot more rare, especially in men, than people would like to believe. But the way narcissism, like, actually psychologically portrays itself is it's a deep sense of insecurity. So as a person, narcissists are always deeply insecure, and they belittle people around them to make themselves look larger. A gentleman, a real man, does not need to belittle anybody to hold his stature. Like that is the key red flags. Like you see a man or a woman belittling people to make themselves look bigger, like in stature, you know, as far as like how, like it's pay, whatever
well,
it
I gotta
is.
do something
you know,
to make
you
myself look bigger. My nickname's Gnome.
Yeah. There's no hope for you. You know, but that's literally what it is. Like, so I would reiterate, actual narcissists among males are actually a lot lower than, you know, people are like, oh, these narcissistic men. No, it's actually really low. But any man or woman that needs to belittle somebody else to make themselves look better or, you know, whatever it is, greater than, you know, is it's red flags just across the board. Be like,
men,
concerns.
Now, I have seen some narcissistic men, and it's like, whoa, where'd you come from? But I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
I mean, men have like, I mean, we have our good nature, like, what do you call it? Bouts of psychological bouts, right? You know, like, so, you know, be like, you know, like, it's, there was a comedian going on about like, you know, you go in a workplace and you're like, oh, I'm not paid as much as this guy, and break down in tears. You know, like, I want to be paid as much as the man. He was joking around about the wage gap and all that. And like, he was like, well, you want to be paid as much as him, but you don't want to be treated like him, because if you were him and we saw you crying, be like, look at this little bitch crying, you know? You know, and that's a totally different response. Like, you know, like, I mean, I'll get slapped.
Well, women are treated differently, but I mean, if you want to look for narcissism, look at all the quote unquote 10s out there. Like, you know, people are talking about like Lizzo's a 10 or whatever or whatnot. Yeah, you wouldn't believe where the body positivity movement has gotten us.
Who said that?
Yeah, a lot of women. They're like, she's a 10. I'm like, no.
I mean, she ain't
no.
ugly, but she ain't a 10 either.
I'm sorry.
Well,
Pretty face or not, like, I'm sorry. You know, if you are bigger than me, and I'm not small by any stretch of the imagination, we have an issue.
Well,
like,
I'm on my romantic bounds knows little limits. So like but like I can also be objective in the sense so I do believe that the
but
majority of women are a work of art, and that is like
that's different than calling them a 10. Like
Yeah.
the difference is like knowing your lane. Like a guy can know exactly what his lane is,
And we're not saying you can't,
You
like
know-
a 10 can't date an 8 or a 10 can't
no,
date a
men
5.
will absolutely date down. Men are they are a lot less picky than women. Women are naturally hypergamous. Now, there's nothing wrong with being that way. That's just how they naturally are. However, just like
It
things
makes better men.
like things to keep in mind as a woman. You can always sleep up, but getting married by that man is a different thing. Like there's different things. Like at the top spectrum of males, they have a lot of options. The average male will absolutely pick a person, because they're like, this is what I can achieve, and do well. Women are like always aiming up, but you have to be careful when you reach for the clouds. It's like the whole Icarus thing. When you try to fly high, you can get burnt, and that's what it is, because you are encountering men who aren't necessarily looking for the next or current wife, like they've got options and they're exercising them. So just because you can get a 8 man, like a man who would be objectively rated as an 8 or whatever or whatnot, if you're a 4, you can probably still pull that for a night. Like that's much different than a lifetime or 10 years or however long the marriage lasts or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, sure, any woman can catch my interest for a time, but it does take a special kind of woman to catch my relationship
And that gets
attraction.
conflated a lot,
You can catch my interest, but my attraction of your, like as a relationship standard are very different.
Yeah, like knowing your lane is important, especially like the amount of especially young, realize this, young females, you're only young once. I mean, guys are only young once too, but it's much different as we age or whatever. So you got be cautious, know what you're doing, because value in the marketplace. As a man, I can achieve higher value by prestige, money, so on and so forth, or whatever. But for women, their highest marketplace value is when you are pretty. And I would say pleasant. I will throw that in there. Like a lot of guys are just young, pretty, whatever. I was pretty and pleasant, right? And as things go along, you become more, become more jaded and older. Your value's going down. So make sure you know the reality of where you are at, and what you can get.
Yeah,
because shunning the guy who could be a real, you're oh yeah, you're not nearly hot enough to talk to me. He'd be like, well, I'm rolling the Benz and you just blew me off.
I mean,
gotta think about it.
Long-term value is in the personality. That's the long-term investment and return on investment will be in the personality. So, and I think that's important. That's important to know, because you can have a high market cap in your youth. But it is important to work on the things that retain your sustainability. Sorry.
Yeah, you sustain your value past your prime, both men and women. Develop a personality that makes you respected by both men and women, because this will sustain your value much longer than be hot, I'm hot.
True.
Now, I did want to bounce back to the coffee shop thing. And the reason I brought that up because
he's disturbed.
I just really want to know what her definition of a coffee shop date is. And the reason I threw in Luke Cage, because I don't know if you all seen Luke Cage or not, but in the show, when he asked did they want to have coffee often led to sex. So I'm trying to figure out what is her.
No, hers is she's talking about the value, not the interaction.
Okay,
right.
So
because
date for her is the actual coffee
the
date?
person she's dating, she talked about that he brought her to this really nice sushi restaurant. She's like, it wasn't like a Michelin star restaurant or anything, but it was really nice, And she's like, I really appreciated that. It showed thought, it was classy, which is all fine and good,
Right, good so far.
But again, in modern, I think if you know, like if you interact with this person, right, and you're like, hey, I'm putting my best foot forward. But if you meet a person, like say you just meet a person out and about, you're walking about and you run into somebody who, you know, is just like, you know, like this person intrigues me. Be like, you know, if you like, would you like, I don't think there's anything wrong with sitting down for a cup of coffee, you know. Now, granted, I'll tell you this as a man, that's probably not going to get you in any doors that you want to go. But if you are like, you know, if you're not positive, that's a way to go about it for both parties, in my opinion. But if you're positive, this person be like, I want to get in the door. Like, I want my foot in the door. I want, like, you know, a shot, you know. Then you know, like, this person should be worth, you know, spending your hard-earned money. Because I'm sorry, like, as a man, I can't think of easily earned money, you know, unless you're spending somebody else's inheritance, right? You worked for that money. You spent time, effort, blood, sweat, and tears to get it. You know, so if you're spending on somebody, make sure they're worth it. So, and if you see them, you're like, God, damn, she's worth it. Then go ahead and do that, and don't feel bad.
Maybe this isn't such a bad thing, but I'm gonna put a stipulation. I think if you're preaching to younger women, you know, because that's essentially what we're doing here is, you know, preaching to younger men, saying, hey, we want to see you guys become gentlemen, you know. And maybe here's some criteria, some advice to become a gentleman, to date and conduct yourself in a gentlemanly manner and maintain that without becoming jaded. So I think if you're preaching to young women and you're like, hey, don't settle for the coffee shop excursion, and you're putting that criteria on because you should be better than that level, and you need to bring yourself up to a standard where you're pulling men who can take you to the Michelin star. If that's what you're preaching, I think all of us should be like saying, hey, let's get better, you know?
Yeah, no,
and I think that's a good thing. But if you're saying, hey, if you got no criterias, no what do you call it? Like, if your like resume comes up short or is a very short list on your qualifications, you know, like you're not meeting, like you don't get all the flourishes.
Yeah. So
You know,
also,
I don't think the value should be put on the initial like first date, whether it's a coffee shop or a restaurant. It's just the interaction between the two individuals to see if
determines
there
the
is
value.
a value to build off of.
Well, I
first
think that
impression
determines
goes a long
the
way,
value
but
of
I
the
agree.
first date, right? So like he was talking about, like you had like a very short conversation. There's no way that she could determine that you like that. All right, well, I guess she wasn't looking for your value on that. So she was trying to determine your value based on the restaurant you took her to versus on the conversation you were having, right? Now that seems like that's not very that's very disingenuous in my opinion, right? I would say that because she hadn't determined, like say you could swing that or whatever, whatnot, but she hadn't done anything. She hadn't had a conversation to you that proved that I want to swing this, like I want to attempt this, right?
Yeah, I'll swing it if you tell me you're working 2 jobs and got like 3 kids and all of them are in like Ivy League schools. Like I'm swing.
Are you talking about like a guy or
like if a girl's like saying, "Hey, I'm working 2 jobs and my kids are straight A students," or
she would not be swinging that kind of date because I wouldn't be going on it.
Well, I would just like to hear, "Hey, I like you." Let's start with that. Like, do you genuinely like me?
Like if you gotta do something in the like. I want to get to know your personality, and I don't see how. Like in what dynamic, like I feel like it's not a good thing, and I could be wrong about this, and we can measure. People will measure things differently because maybe the mere materialistic is of value and it says something when you're willing to, indulge somebody. Maybe it says something about your generosity. But to me, like, it seems like your personality, like, I want to get to know your personality, and, like, I don't understand how, like, putting a price tag on the date.
Well, that's because women value different things. So they're it's a test. Like they're like, okay,
Sure.
Can he financially afford this, right? But as a woman, in my opinion, you have to warrant that. And I'm sorry, by a quick conversation, like on a dating app, I'm sorry, like if I haven't conversed with you in person, if I haven't seen like it for myself, I'm sorry, I don't know if you're worth $109 a plate.
Yeah, see,
You know,
that's
plus
my point.
yeah,
109
plus
a plate.
like and like I mean, if you are, that's fine and great. I'll happily take you out, wine and dine you or whatever. But I have to know that, right? Do not expect like it would be like as a dude expecting the woman to know what I'm worth, after a 3-minute conversation. Like the way she's testing it is by the plate. And I'm sorry, it goes both ways, sweetheart. I have to know that, when I take you out to this restaurant, that, I at least have the possibility of, being in that realm of being like, not only am I just a dinner, there's actual genuine interest. Because I'm sorry, if there's not genuine interest, we have both wasted our time. And especially me,
Time is
because I
valuable.
spent resources,
Yeah, time is valuable.
Time, resources.
Because like even if you're like you go out on that date, if you're if you're trying to make something of yourself, your time for that date is limited. If you have family responsibility, your time for that date is limited, and like it might not even be the 109. It might just be the copious amount of weekend. Like say it was on a weekend. Like how much more can I benefit my future if I didn't go on that date? So you're taking away from my future prospects, So if I'm investing my time into this future prospect, make it worth my time. And I'm, it's a lot about personality and figuring that out.
So like a good example, right, is things I've spent tons of money on but never regretted. That's the difference, right? So if I went out, right, and spent $300, on a meal with an individual, which, I've done, and I didn't regret it. I had a exceptional time, and it was totally worth it to me. Like, that's what you should be looking for, right? Like, you didn't regret, like, yes, you spent time and resources, but did I regret it? No. Therefore, it's all good, right? If you go out and by the middle of the meal, and say 3 cocktails in, you're like, I wish I had 4 more of these cocktails to get out of this situation, then it was not worth your time, effort, and resources. And that's not what you're looking for. So you want to have at least a good idea that this person, that's why I think gentlemen, ladies, put your best foot forward. Don't be out there be like, I'm a queen, or, I'm the boss, dudes or whatever, and, ladies, because, you can say that all you want, but the second you say that, it's a red flag. No person who I've ever known who is respected said, respect me. I'm the boss or whatever or whatnot. Like, they declaring it is a red flag to me. Be like, oh, well, if you either personify it or you don't. If you declare it, I'm sorry.
Well, you're not gonna get the respect. You might deserve the respect or have the authority to issue such things. Because some people won't respect you because they themselves are not respectable. I've seen plenty of people do that to my bosses, and I'm like, I've had my peers do that before, and I'm just like, there's a dynamic difference. But regardless if you deserve the respect or not, you cannot demand the respect. Respect is given, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Or you cannot demand it. It has to be earned / given from the other individual, and you demanding
you have
it.
to personify it. That's the thing.
So
people, even if they don't want to, there's always going to be some disrespectful asshole out there.
Yeah.
Yeah. But in general, people will see a person who is respectable, and their innate response will be to respect them. And if they do, those are the people you want around you. If it's the disrespectful asshole who's just that way because they can be, then you don't need them around you.
They're probably not a good employee anyways.
Or
and that's what
employee,
I'm-
prospect, whatever they are, they're not worth your time, right?
Yeah,
And-
I think that's good to know, because a lot of the people who did not respect the people that I thought were respectful, I was like, I don't respect my peers' work ethic. Why are they not fired? Just get them out of here. You know, I've managed plenty of people in my day, and like you can't get respect from everybody, but you're not gonna get from demanding.
I think knowing your worth versus loving yourself is two different things. That's something I kind of like to talk about because there's like this whole thing about self-love, and I think it's drastically different. It's been conflated with self-respect. So you have to have boundaries and respect for yourself. But when I feel like it's dangerous when you're like, well, I love myself. I think you can even like yourself, but the second you're practicing self-love, that is dangerously narcissistic. Because, if you love yourself, especially for men, like men, love is all encompassing. Don't expect a rational decision from a man who's in love, because all rationality is out the window. It's everything goes, right? Because it's almost like like it puts you out of parameters, right? Like there is no like standard to hold to when you idealistically, which is how men love. When men fall in love, they fall in love idealistically, and that breaks down any kind of like boundaries. So you have to be very careful. But I think respecting yourself is key. Loving yourself is dangerous. So
I think it's dangerous without knowing the boundaries to get to the dangerous side. Because I can still have self-love, eat better, exercise, do all those things, and it's helping me become a better person without crossing the line to where it infringes on the people that are around me.
I think, but that's where we're confusing self-respect, because you respect yourself enough to like eat well, do all these things. It's not necessarily that you're loving yourself. I think I would differentiate like when a person says, well, like I saw this TikTok, this blew me away. Oh. She's like, I cheat on my man because it's self-love. He's not fulfilling X, Y, and B, and I cheat on him because it feels like these, it ticks these boxes that he's not doing. It's self-love. That the love of somebody, yourself over other things, it's beyond respect. Like I said, you bypass like rationale and boundaries. I believe that people can respect themselves. I believe if you love yourself, that is a dangerous road to, prioritizing
on the people around her. So I think what's important here,
because it's self-love. It's never about people around you.
So I think what's important here is I think that's a great way to determine gentleman versus narcissist or boy or man or whatever.
The wide variety.
So respecting yourself is actually everything you just said, like working out, doing all these things, being healthy. I have respect for myself, but I'm not infatuated with myself.
Yeah, that's the danger.
And I think love has typically, and I could be wrong about this, we could explore this a little bit more, but I think this is a good, it's a good exploration because love implies some measure of infatuation.
Yep, 100%.
Desire, right? And I'm not attracted to myself in that manner.
And well, you should be, in my opinion.
So, but I do have boundaries. I do want to be healthy. I do want certain boundaries met out of respect for myself because I respect myself, and I'm not going to degrade myself in a way that compromises my ethics. And if somebody's asking me to compromise very firm boundaries, then I'm like, these are no-goes.
Yeah.
That's not a good thing, and you have to have
self-respect,
confidence, and I do think that is utterly critical for women to have that self-respect. But I think phrasing it as love is very, very different.
Well, I think they look at it differently than we do.
You can disrespect yourself by dating the wrong man. That is absolutely 100%.
Likewise, you can disrespect yourself by dating the wrong woman, because as men, that's really one of the biggest worst things you can do to your male partner is disrespect them, especially publicly. If you disrespect a man publicly, not only that is a huge offense to a man, and it also degrades yourself because you're with somebody that you couldn't manage to stay respectful to in public.
Yes. So that is I'm not saying like the guy has to be the star of the show, but I don't think most women understand that there's, to get to a level of a qualified man, our standards are high for each other.
Yes.
I have very high standards for sons. I have very high standards for friends. So, like you shouldn't be like you can be okay with the man you are today, but you shouldn't be satisfied to stay as the man you are today.
No, 100%.
So,
and that's again how like where we get to the self thing. I'm perfect, exactly. Like I'm a 10. I'm perfect how I am. Like you think that way, you've completely eliminated the
All
ability to
for
improve.
growth.
Yeah, any
Yeah,
room
all
for
room
growth.
for growth.
So dangerous.
I just want to interject. So I think we should really dive into what each person individually thinks love is. So I think that is what is
Oh, that's
obscuring
a
what other people are taking
bag of
into
cats
what
right there.
self-love is. Because you do have, from the Greek side, the 5 different types of love. I can't remember every one, but you got Philippi, you got Eros, you got Agape, and I forgot what the other 2 are. But if you're only focusing on the Eros, then yeah, that can be very dangerous because you're really focusing on loving yourself in that manner. But if you look at it on the Agape side,
Well, so agape love is unconditional, right? And unconditional love the closest thing we have to it, the closest thing is a parent's love for his child. And that's not absolute, like, right?
Mm-hmm.
So not every parent, unfortunately, which they should, in my opinion, is born with the agape love. And especially like moms, like they have this unique ability to love their child like no one will ever love that child, right?
Yeah.
Like I would say most mothers, like more than even any other person will ever love that child. Like there's a special connection, like they were part of each other at one time. I can never know what that was like. I think that is probably one of the most beautiful and incredible things about a woman, that love they have to her child. Now the balancing love is the love of a father is there to be like, because there are conditions on it, like there are expectations. And in reality, all of humankind after a certain age has to live by that kind of love, like the conditional love. Like all love has a condition on it, like a breaking point,
Yeah, I can't understand the mother's love sometimes. It's amazing because I couldn't love some of these kids out here. I'm just saying. I'm just saying. But I can't imagine a scenario that I wouldn't love my son. I mean, the deplorable actions that would have to be involved with that to break that love. Because I've been disappointed many of times. But losing that love is a almost unfathomable thing.
Yeah, I would say so.
But like, that doesn't stop me from being disappointed.
Yeah,
I can still.
It's the difference.
I think there's I think there's importance to explore here because like I feel like we definitely like need to hone in on respect because especially like a lot of people do confuse the love and all that and like confuse it as unconditional and like. You need the room for improvement. You need to progress.
I have a good example, right? So there are obvious conditions to a woman's love, right? Mm-hmm. So, and I'm not saying they should or shouldn't be there. That's not the case I'm making right here. But there are obvious conditions, right? Like she wants to feel protected, connected with, like all these things. Like she has criteria that, that determines like her love for you, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's memes all the time about like the woman's list of what you need to do. Yeah. The man's list is like. So
here's the thing, like, and I think where it gets a little conflated, on the feminine side is when they're like, oh, well, we haven't given you any for like 2 months or whatever, and we demand your loyalty. Like, is that the kind of love we should be supporting? Because I'm sorry, do you love me if you've denied me intimacy for 2 months? So, you can claim it any way you want, but for men, that's how men feel emotionally connected to their partners is
Well,
through being
I
intimate.
gotta use the feminist phrase here, and I believe this is the
Oh,
feminist
Lord.
phrase. So
Buckle in, boys.
that is absolutely not all of the relationship. All the relationship can't be physical, but it can be part.
No, but I mean it's a huge part.
That's-
Like I said, it's
That's
one of
part
the,
of the
it's one of the
relationship.
conditions.
Might not
It is
be
part.
all.
It
I'm
is
just
part.
saying it's part.
It's one of the conditions. Like, like I think a lot of people fail to realize, like, just because men have a short list of conditions, because a man, most men are loyal creatures, right? And they don't want to be driven to being disloyal. And that's a thing. A woman should respect a man to not be like, not drive him to that. If you're like, and you're in this realm, you're like, well, you haven't done this, or this, so I'm going to deny you this. That's not how that works. You don't take things, because something you feel like you're not getting something. You work to get what you want. You don't just start taking things. It's like if I stop feeding my kids. Be like, oh, well, my kids didn't get the grades I wanted to them, so I'm going to stop feeding them. That's not love.
Right.
I'm like, I'm pretty sure child services would be knocking on the door and be like, so we heard you'd stop feeding your kids because they were getting C's in class. I mean, there'd be repercussions, people.
I mean, that's a good motivator. I will say this, I'm not advocating it, but I
Oh,
will
Lord.
say
Not yet at that.
Work those little fingers.
some of the greatest motivation I had was lack of food, lack of resources. It
Well,
motivates you. I'm not saying it was a good motivation.
But that's not love right there. Like that's
That is not
a deeply flawed upbringing, which to people out there, there's a huge difference between people who have gone hungry and people who have never known what it is like to be hungry. You can see the difference.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then we also need to take into account of, given if they do come from a two-parent household, what is the mom saying? What is the dad saying? What are their friends saying? And what are they getting from social media? Because the biggest one now is social media as being the new added influence in today's society versus how it was 30 years ago.
Social media
Yes,
is a
so
good-
it's
is a
affecting
huge
us
influence.
culturally. However, don't go out, right? This is my thing, is abdicating responsibility. So yes, it's influencing our culture, but the second you go out, well, you're like, this is just our culture. You've taken a back seat. You've abdicated your role to have a decision in it. No, you go out there and you're like, these are my choices. You cannot if you go out there and you're like, I broke into somebody's car because I didn't have a car, did you still break into the car? Yes.
You cannot advocate. So another criteria of a gentleman, you cannot advocate your responsibilities, because one thing all gentlemen will learn in their life is the fact that
Responsibilities never go away.
anything worth having will want to be taken from you.
Yeah.
You must maintain it. So there's nothing. There's nothing.
Complacency is a
There's
bad thing.
nothing that you will have that is good that people won't want to take from you. Now, I'm not saying they're going to take it from you,
But they'll
you
want
have
it.
to work under the impression that people will want that from you. They want to take it from you. So
Kind of like how I would say, like, anything worth having is going to be, you'll have to work hard for it, right?
It's
And
work.
people, it's work. And a lot of people are like, well, love shouldn't be work. What are you living in? Like, no marriage I have ever encountered where, like, they were like, oh, this was a breeze, this was easy. Love is always easy at first because that's the infatuation. Maintaining the relationship is lots of laborious work.
Well,
And people are like, well, that sounds awful. No, it's
Maybe.
a work of love. Like that should be like one of the greatest things the masterpiece you forge with your hands. That's how men look at it. Be like, we are forging this thing with our hands, this great empire or whatever. And that's how you should see it. Like, the fact is, like, when you throw your hands up and be like, I'm just not happy, that sounds like the biggest cop out. Like, it's just like, you're not happy. I mean, like, there's days I wake up and I want to smother you with a pillow. I mean,
So, I mean, you're like, what? All right, maybe we're growing up in different worlds. Like, maybe I live in the wrong world, but, like, is this, am I working under some illusion that this world's easy? Like, if this world in itself is not an easy world to
When
live
you're
in,
earning like $4,000 a week in OnlyFans, like the perception of hard is much different. I mean, like
there's a lot hard in that scenario, but
not
it
that
ain't-
kind of
it
hard.
ain't the
Not,
part, you
not
know?
that kind of hard. But I mean, literally,
like if
that,
you get it that, yeah.
but
no.
that's the difference. Like when you have like access, like, you know, like if you ever watch like these street interviews where they ask what the average female has in her bank account, like, you know, you have got people who are rocking out tons of money, but it's just like pro athletes. So NFL players, almost all of them, 3 years after they stop being NFL players, are broke and filing for bankruptcy because, like, and I'm not even saying they didn't work hard to get the money, but they got it quickly, right? And they spent it as quickly. They didn't. A lot of them. Now there are some who learned to, like, they're like, hey, I broke bones for this. You know, they took the appreciation and time to be like invested, so on and so forth. You know, done well. I mean, like Shaquille O'Neal. Like, I mean, he's doing fine or whatever. You know. But
Yeah, like,
he
you
didn't.
just
He
pay
didn't earn it
somebody-
quick, you know, necessarily, and didn't spend it quick. You know, I'm sure there was some point, but you know, it's making the proper judgments. But if you're out there earning like thousands of dollars, like a week, you know, just by like you're like, I turn on a camera and I've got boobies, you know. No hate, y'all do your thing, earn your money or whatever. But there's not gonna. It's the same thing as the kid with the brand new Mustang. You know, he's not gonna respect. He's like, I'll always be, you know, like, oh, I can just get another one. Well, guess what? You hit 50, yeah, fans is probably taking a pay cut.
Yeah, I can't imagine a world where you're like, and you know, like love should be easy. I just can't, like, you know, like I just.
Well, Disney said it was. Disney said it's, you
Well,
know, your
you
knight
know.
in shining armor runs in, swoops up, kills,
when you sleep.
you know.
See, I'm not gonna lie. Being the youngest one here, I've never grown up with the ideology of love is easy. I've always been told it was hard and it was something you have to work towards.
Well,
That's good.
one, they did you a favor, and two, you know, you're male, so that's one of the more intrinsically male things is we earn our place in society, wherever it is, right? You know, we don't come out, most of us, and I'm sure there's a few or whatever, who don't come out like literally works of art, as, you know, he was talking about like women, you know, like we don't come out like having innate value. And women, they do have an innate value. Like,
Yeah, everybody has an innate value. but
it's different.
It's
Especially
perceived differently.
societal value on like women is like like you can be, all right, like this is the reference that everybody gives, especially in the manosphere. You can be 19, not have done anything with your life. If you are beautiful, you can end up on a yacht in Dubai.
Yeah.
Did you work for that yacht? Did you do anything? No, you happened to look gorgeous, so you got there, right? That is innate value, but it fades. A man who has that yacht toiled and worked, or maybe schemed, who knows? But he got there through his efforts to get the boat. That's what he had. There's stories to how he got there, right?
There is definitely truth to that persona. I've seen that firsthand. There's, you know, 100% truth. And I mean, like I've met plenty of like online streamers who are resentful. They're like, oh, the girl can get 20 plus viewers, you know, which is good on Twitch, right? 20 viewers is good on Twitch. But, you know, like the guy sitting over here, you know, cracking out jokes, doing backflips. Literally, I've seen a guy do a backflip because he lost a game. That was part of the bet. You know, I was just like, hey, this guy legit did a backflip in his nerdy little room. Like, I'm surprised he didn't hit the ceiling. But anyways, you know, he's got like 2 or 3
Dumb
viewers.
ways to die.
You know,
anyways.
like, you know, like 2 or 3 viewers, and like she's like says something every 5 minutes, and like she's got 20 viewers. You know, and then like you go up,
It's because men are visual.
you know, like
Her viewers are men. You know, they're like, oh, I click on, looks
You know,
good.
Right.
And I so there's definitely merit to that statement, but there's also like that sustainability thing that we were going over. You know, like sustaining things. You can get it for a short period of time, but you got to figure out what to do with it. You know.
Yeah, I think that brings us, you know, back to defining what a gentleman, like what a gentleman should entail. And I think maybe we should, because we've discussed a lot of like the don'ts or whatever, but and some like things that we are expecting. So like let's see, like what are like say 3 things that that you would say are required to being perceived as a modern gentleman, and what are a couple of things that you would do in cases of people who are not going to like a raging feminist. The first time I ever encountered one is before I even really knew what a feminist was years and years ago. I was walking into the mall and I opened the door for a lady, and I held it open, and she stood there, like stopped dead in her tracks and scowled at me. And I was just like, I'm in the South. I thought this is what we do. And I was like, at first I didn't know what to do. And then I was like, oh, I was kind of offended. And I was just like, fine. I walked right through and I just let her be on her way while she can open her own door.
Yeah. I don't think that's more on the extreme side of feminism, because
it's pretty prevalent now.
Feminism itself, at its root, is just to be for women, but they take it to the extreme of I can do everything myself. I don't need a man. Like that's the extreme side of it. Like
I think part of the where feminism kind of like derailed a little bit is like when you go for like it's for women, yes, but it cannot only be for women at their benefit, So part of
equality doesn't mean when it benefits you. It means across the board.
So like there will be things to make it equal or not a double standard or not to be a double standard will come at the female's negative, the detriment to the female side, and that's just, and I think it's hard to keep that in mind in any business transaction. Like you're pushing for something, it's hard to keep in mind. I might have to lose some on this negotiation to get what I want overall, because that's kind of what feminist is. It's negotiating society in a direction that makes things fair and equal. But it cannot be fair and equal if you're only negotiating for your benefit and nothing can negatively impact you. And I think currently, and I could be wrong, but to me, what it seems is currently that's where feminist stands.
Because they're going to the extreme.
But there's nothing left. Anything that negatively benefits.
Yeah, they don't want a responsibility for any outcomes. How can you claim there's a need for? It's just like the root of the movement. I'm not gonna say there's not a base need for equality, right, or whatever. But equality can't like dissolve biological things. Like because I'm a man, I'm gonna have higher bone density. I'm gonna be physically stronger. Like the feminist movement can't dissolve that. It is a thing that is there. Yeah, that doesn't mean we can't have equal value as people, but we can have different roles.
Yeah, and first off, I'm all for feminism because it's females fighting for females, and historically males have been supposed to fight for females. So we're getting help fighting for females. Like that's a win.
Well, no, that's not how it's perceived. Like is
not how it's perceived. That is how it was originally portrayed, and like all men, it's like saying, Are you okay with people eating? Yes, I'm okay with people eating. Well, no, you don't get to eat all my food. That's mine. You can eat. I'm okay with you eating your food, not my food too. And I think that's kind of like it's one of those the beginning premise is very admirable, but that's like as a salesperson, that's how you sell people things. You're like, this is a good thing, and you just slip in like some kind of copyright. Like fine print under there, like I get your food, I get your cake and eat it.
Unfortunately, I think feminism started off with a bad precedent, right? Like I think like women wanting to vote and have a say is really important. Like the benefit to society from having a egalitarian society is huge. Like you want feminine ideas and perspectives in society. You want them. Like it's completely necessary. However, balance. Like the bad precedent I'm talking about is like they're like, well, we don't want to get drafted, right? Now I don't agree with necessarily women being drafted, right? But it's the fact they're like, we don't want we want to vote. We want to have something without the stipulation,
Without
you
the
want the
negative.
stipulations, right?
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
So
yeah.
and because of that precedent, we were like, okay, because like men were like, well, we don't want to see women in war either. Get rid of that, because men saw the value of the feminine perspective, which I agree. Like it is a value, and we should consider it, right? However, that precedent kept going. Be like, well, I want C's without the responsibility, and anything again with like we go back to the car without earning it, without the responsibility, you cannot respect it.
Yeah, they want all the benefits without the negatives,
Yeah.
and that's not how it works. But so going back to the gentleman, if we're gonna do like three things,
Three things they have to embody.
So what would be three things that you think meets the criteria to quantify you or somebody or some other man as a gentleman?
Well, I thought I was only going one, but yeah. So I would say definitely to not think of yourself but others. That's definitely got to be in there. Let's see.
You're thinking of me?
Yeah, because
Yeah,
like in the
is it naked?
No. It's
Ah,
a
darn. Say, but what?
No, like just the general like care for others.
Ladies, we're
Like,
giving him back to you.
Let's see.
Where's that?
Two more. Yeah, I only had that one at the top of my head. Like
All right. What are a couple things that you have to be ready on? How would you deal with them? Like dealing with, obviously there's opposition to being a gentleman. Like say you hold the door open and you get that. Should you just stop what you're doing? Like should you conform? Or is there like a base need for resistance? Be like, even if she gives me the scowl or she like behaves in a way that's not becoming, I still opened the door.
Right.
I still did it because, so I'll just kind of like set something. I'll let you guys go around. All right. So I think two things, like you are going to encounter people who will disrespect your actions as a gentleman. Now, that shouldn't determine how you act in the world. Nobody's disrespect, like if somebody disrespects you, guess who's in charge of how you feel? You. Do not kowtow to whatever the world, has determined, by like, let's say you go out and you're some, lady is out there and be like, you're a misogynistic, part of the patriarchy. Water on a duck's back, my man. Like,
So I think that is important. I think so. It is important to be influenced by what people think of you. I think it is a good understanding to be able to look inside and like critically evaluate yourself. I think that's important.
That's considering. I wouldn't say influence.
So, well, I mean, it influences your opinion is kind of what I was getting at. So like people's behaviors and how they react to you should influence your behavior. But it has to be noted. You have to have this knowledge that the more you achieve, the more envious people will become of you. So like the more you do the right thing, the more the people who aren't doing the right thing feel inadequate and will try to lash out. So you have to take that into account. It is a balancing act because people perceiving you, if you're doing something wrong, society typically tells you, like don't hit people. You hit somebody and everybody's like, hey man, don't do that. Like you're cheating at basketball, whatever it might be. Society will, like, they give you pointers, and that what dictates kind of like how we know what we're doing is good or bad. But in the same instant, it is known that people will, like, especially like spiteful people, they will be resentful of people who achieve things they themselves cannot because they are unwilling to put in the effort. So you have to balance that, and that's hard to do. But it, like, you need to look in.
What you're balancing, so I'm not sure, like I get what you're saying, because I'm not sure, because like if you do things differently because of like people who have ill intent or envious behavior, like
you'll self-sabotage.
Yeah, you'll self-sabotage.
But if you do things differently, because even if they're not necessarily like your friend, but they react in a certain way, you can look in on that and you can see if it makes sense.
Well, I mean, like that's always like just being a careful student of yourself and your environment. However, um, I think there are sometimes, I would say this, I think you have to be prepared sometimes to take the L with holding your standards, right? Sometimes you will lose because you adhere to a standard. I'm sure there were people in history, who took the L because they stood up for something they believed in, right? Now, like, there's ways to, in the average, life we have, like, the ways to mitigate this. Like, if you encounter, like, somebody who does not want you to open the door for them or whatever, whatnot, walk right by them. Don't give them the time of day. Like, and that's the difference between, like, the general thing. As a gentleman, you're going to afford, like, I once heard a gentleman's goal is to make everybody around them feel comfortable, right? To an extent. Now, I think that's a great sentiment, but you have to be very careful, like what you do, because you will never want to drop your standards to make somebody feel more comfortable. Like, you are gracious. Like, I think it's good to be gracious, but graciousness is instantly out the window when you have, shown, like, blatantly shown that you are not deserving of the grace that is, in general, that you give, right? So, like, like the average person, like, if I ever encountered that lady again or whatever or whatnot, would I open the door for her? Absolutely not. But as a basis, like, in the world, I will open the door, for, a lady, young or old or whatever or whatnot, is a matter of habit that I take for myself, right? That's my self-respect. And I'm not going to let somebody else dictate it. But when I see it's not being deserved, I've determined they're not worthy, and go on.
So I think sometimes people forget what good graces are. So my good graces are, I'll treat you with respect. And when you've proven to me that you don't deserve the respect, my good graces are not
they're not available to you.
No, they're available, and the only thing you're getting is me not, like, standing on the street side, like, yelling at the top of my lungs how deplorable of a person you are. That is then my good graces. Like, if you don't meet this level of respect for these good graces, the bare minimum good graces is I'm just not pointing it out every possible chance.
Yeah.
That's my good graces. And those, for some people, are indeed good graces. Because I've met some people who are downtrodden.
So I would say, like, I think the three things a gentleman should be, I think a gentleman should be gracious, loyal, and respectable. Not respectful, but respectable. Like, somebody who not only gives respect, but, in turn is receiving respect.
Okay.
I agree with that.
I would say those are the three things that determine a gentleman.
I'd say the same thing. I would say I can't really think of any words for it. I can only think of, like, say, things that I've done. And that is, like, say, going above and beyond for people without any expectations of anything in return. And now this isn't just for, like, saying a gentleman as in being with a woman. I mean, this is just for all around people.
Gentleman is all facets of your life, I would imagine.
Yeah. So, like I said, going above and beyond for people and not expecting anything in return.
Okay.
Because, I mean, let's just be real. If you're doing stuff to expect things in return, are you really being a gentleman?
I hope so, because I very much want things in return.
Well, what I mean is, like, the same things.
What if it's just a rubber ducky? I'm just gonna ask.
It's the thought that counts, right? Like, what are you saying? Like, I
think,
like, somebody giving me a rubber ducky after saying
like
I do something.
Like, I go help you move. Can I get a rubber ducky?
I think the thing that gets conflated here is the difference between the white knight behavior and being a gentleman. So there's a big difference between a white knight and a gentleman, right? So, as a gentleman, because there are certain things you respect of yourself, there are going to be certain things you respect of other people. Now, you might not necessarily need to expect an outcome. Like, that's the difference. You might not need to expect an outcome to whatever you gave, but do not go above and beyond. This would be my advice. Do not go above and beyond unless the person has proven that they are they are worthy of going above and beyond for, because therefore you will not need to expect an outcome, because you'll know that they've already proven that they're worth whatever you did. So it's like spending that money on that date, right? You had a great time and you don't regret spending the money. It's the same difference. Never invest above and beyond for somebody who you don't know or for certain is worthy of the above and beyond. That would be what I would say to that. I think it's indicative that, you know, that like that kind of, you're always, you know, like you're out there for the people that you know are worthy of that.
I think at a certain level of being a gentleman, there is a time where you have the resources to go above and beyond for people, and you are investing in future. You're sowing the seeds for the future, and I think there is merit in that. But that is at a certain level, and I think you know, if you're investing and you say, we'll take an example, like you're pouring tons, like millions of dollars into a funds that gets you to some kind of like resources in outer space, you know, and you're like, I want to invest in the future of the world, and you know that is kind of selfless, and you know,
Elon Musk in it.
Sure, yeah, like Elon, like trying to invest into a future that isn't necessarily for you strictly, but you are investing in something for something, you know, and some people need that investment. I think there is something there, but you just have to really know where you're at
That's
in
seeing
life.
the potential. It's just like when everybody was like, you know, so when Elon Musk bought Twitter, right? His Tesla stocks took a huge dive. They're like, oh my God, he's losing. He knew he was going to take a L on his stocks.
Yeah.
Why? Because he saw something they need to invest in. That's the difference. Seeing potential, right?
Yeah.
Or whatever.
And I don't think he
invested. Bit harder to do with people.
And I can't even begin to claim to know the inner workings of his mind, but I don't think he invested strictly in Twitter for money purposes. I think there's some other, like whatever his ploy is in general.
It's some sort of goal.
Yeah, he has a goal. Now, is that goal in my best interest or not? Who knows? You know, I can assume one way or the other. You know, definitely.
No way to know until you hit fruition.
Yeah, it's. I mean, you know, you can argue that off the bat you have this perception or that perception or how it looks, but I do believe anyone who's intelligent as this man seems to be, you know, your initial perception he has considered.
Yeah.
And that requires further inspection. So what would going above and beyond, and you know, is important without necessarily immediate return is important. I think there's always some kind of return. You said satisfaction can be a return. If I invest into
as long as you're satisfied with what you received, right? And and having appropriate expectations is like important too. So like you get your return, and if you're not satisfied, if you had it's like if you go to see a movie that's been really hyped up, right? You went, you know, and you were dissatisfied because you had such high expectations. Like that's why you should always have a base level of expectations. That way you have at least a certain amount of like, this is okay. You know, if you come out and you feel like you're like, my pockets are empty, I feel like I got robbed, and you know, like they didn't even say goodnight. You know, they just took my wallet and left.
Because saying goodnight really makes a robbery go by.
It does.
I mean that's
it's just like
so
first class thuggery right there.
You know, yeah,
like,
it really is.
I mean, he was so polite.
Oh man. I think, like, what would be another thing you would list as a gentleman quality?
Selflessness.
Selflessness.
Now, that comes to an extent, I would say, because I mean, you don't want to be selfish 24/7, because being selfish kind of makes you arrogant, and that's not really a quality of being a gentleman, if you ask me.
No.
Some amount of humility.
Yeah. I think every man should, you know, there's an extent of a certain amount of selflessness in every good man, right? So like when it comes to their family, like you have to be very careful when you are selfless because as a man with a family, you're not considering yourself. It is your unit as a whole, right? So if you're selfless and you're like, well, I gave away the car, honey, because like somebody needed it, you've hurt your family as a whole. So you're not being selfish by hanging on to your car. You are protecting your family as a whole, right? So, but within your family, you're like, if I, so lots of men work grueling jobs to support their family. They are being selfless in their work to provide for their family. I think that's the difference.
Yeah. So, I guess one more criteria you would place. So, being able. Let me rephrase this if this is an accurate statement. You're being able to be selfless.
Yeah.
I think that is an admirable quality because what he hit on right there, like some jobs that men work. I've worked the sweaty jobs. I've literally pulled off a glove from my hand that dripped sweat out of it. I've dripped sweat onto the person working under me before. Like I was trying to do something, like I was holding some tools or whatever.
I'm sure there's some ladies who've done that as well.
I'll be working so hard, and it was in the grueling heat and just I'll be dripping sweat down on the guy. I was like, sorry, my bad, mate. My bad, So like some amount of selflessness, you have to have the willing. It cannot all be about you. I think that is an admirable quality of a gentleman. What is that accurate representation of what you're talking about?
Yeah.
What would be a third thing?
Yeah. I thought he gave that would be his, like you kind of like implied a third, so we'll just.
All right, fair enough. I definitely can think of two off the top of the thing. One is confidence earned. I think to be a gentleman, you have to not only be confident, but earn that confidence.
Yeah,
I think you need to be a measure of a man that has earned that level of confidence, and I think you need to exert confidence.
Mm-hmm.
And don't mistake me. Humility is part of being a gentleman, but
humility is not stating it. When you exert confidence and you earn it, you don't like the humility is not being like, well, I've bought like these many houses and so on and so forth. Like like you just know that you have. And if a person they're like, hey, X, Y, and B, well, you're like, well, I have this, like touting versus relaying. There's two different things. Like if a person is like, well, what do you do for a living? And you can say any number of things or whatever, confidently, or I do this, I have this or whatever or whatnot. But if you're out there and be like, well, I'm the man because I've bought this many houses and I own this many cars, you are touting it. There's no humility there.
Yeah. So confidence earned, definitely be one of them. The next one would be a respect, learning self-respect, having respect for yourself, boundaries, knowing moral boundaries that you have and why.
Yeah, knowing why is really important. You can say you have a belief. If you don't know why you have that belief, there is no way it'll stand the tides of that can come in life.
I think you have to have a pragmatic reason for your respect of yourself. And I think that's a failing that a lot of people get is they are like, oh, I want to respect myself, but I have no idea why I should respect myself.
Yeah, and that would go to the self-love. They're like, oh, just because you should love yourself. You're like, well, that's flimsy, in the wind.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of a third thing. I think it's your decorum. I think having a certain. I think part of what could make you a gentleman is like I was saying earlier, good graces are one thing when you first meet somebody, but meeting somebody who doesn't deserve the normal amount of good graces, still having the good grace not to point it out all the time. I think that's one example of decorum. I think I think it has something to do with romance. I think you have to have some amount of romantic sense of self, and of the world to be able to have the art in the world flourish, so to speak. The flowers of the world.
Yeah.
To grow the flowers of the world.
You have to have the vision, right?
Yeah. Yes. So
if you perceive the world can, like, the world can be falling apart and you can still have a vision for it, right? That's the difference between so the statement is so optimists made the airplane and pessimists made parachutes, right? So there's a
Both
need
necessary.
but there's a need
Right.
for balance, right? But if you have unbridled optimism, right, and you crash, you're screwed, right? But you'll never fly if you don't have the vision, right? So there's the checks and balances, right, which are the parachutes, checks and balances, right? But you gotta have that vision to fly in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah, I think motivation would be a strong criteria.
Yeah.
As
It's
a
the aspiration, like the craving to do more.
yeah. All right.
I like that take on it.
That's
That's pretty solid.
Yep. Well, Aaron, you're the last victim. So, and after we get your thoughts, we're gonna close up here and call it a day.
Okay. Is like closing statement or
You can do your closing thoughts on like the because I if I recall, like you had like one when you like three things for like a
yeah,
gentleman.
I still really just got one.
Okay, no, that's cool. All right, so
everybody had really great points that
Yeah.
kind of like stemmed
that
off
you
of
can
that.
agree with and kind of like
yeah,
culminate into like cool.
as a collective.
Yeah, awesome. That's what we're here for. All right. So just closing thoughts. We'll go from this way to me, and then we'll close out and call it a day.
Well, overall, in regards to the gentleman, I think that it is very subjective to each and everyone's viewpoint on what that is in today's society. What a gentleman was 30, 50, 100 years ago is not the same as today, although we still have the core things that we just went over that we believe makes up a gentleman and should still be intact for today and futures to come. In regards to that, I think it is very necessary to be gentlemanlike in today's society, whether or not someone else or a female perceives what you're doing as to be gentlemanlike because of their obscure outlook on life. But overall, I think it is necessary. We should continue to strive to be gentlemen in our everyday life and for ourselves, and that's pretty much it. Just keep striving to be gentlemen.
I just kind of want to stem off that because for a closing statement, I think gentlemen are needed more now than ever in history. You know, a gentleman is capable and admirable, and we have very few of those left. It feels like we want leaders. We need leaders, and if you want, like, the way society to me I think goes, like, thinking that you don't need a gentleman is the greatest mistake I think anyone can make. Like, a gentleman is needed now more than ever in society. I think the pendulum is swinging, and I think it's swinging hard in directions that make people perceive, oh, you don't have to be a gentleman anymore. I'm sorry. You want ladies to be ladies? You need a gentleman. You need to set the boundaries, set the standards. You know, I think it is folly to assume that gentlemen aren't needed anymore. You know, I think it's critical to understand what a gentleman is and to really dive into that. And I hope that we kind of give them some insight into that. You know.
I wouldn't say mine is more of a closing statement, but more of an appreciation and thank y'all for having me here.
Oh no, thank you. We
Because
appreciate
it
you
definitely opened up a lot of perspectives and had a different wavelength going through my mind, hearing all of the different things y'all would have to say. And honestly, you're right. We do need a lot of gentlemen in the world. We don't have that many of them, and we really do need them.
We got plenty of players.
Definitely.
I don't know which one I fall into. I'm shooting for gentlemen.
coming. Oh, Lord.
I will say this. I will say one more thing. Like, I think
Well, we got a top 10% of players, and then we got a load of simps. So
You keep-
guys, don't simp.
Yeah,
you know,
never
no
simp.
simping. You just cut it out.
I may not be a good person, but I work very hard to put my surroundings that enable me to do good things. You know, like, because I know what I'm capable of in bad situations, and I have the luxury of being a good person in this situation.
So I've once what's funny is like a lot of people take that view or whatever. And I remember talking to a person who was in a bad mindset and was possibly fixed on doing some bad things. He's like, you don't know me. I'm not a good person. I was like, no person is a good person. The difference between good and evil is temperance. You have to steel yourself against the all humanity has a darkness inside them, but it is yours to wield when necessary.
Yeah.
You know, like you can't, like, you have to be hardened to the fact. It's like a blade. A blade, you know, if it's not hard, you know, like, what is it? No, a sharp blade is, no, a dull blade is the most dangerous. You know, you have to be sharpened. You have to be able to act with a strong fury when necessary. You know,
a cunning and sharp mind.
Yep. And that sometimes can manifest in terrible ways, but temperance is what will determine whether your outcomes are good or bad.
Yeah. True statement.
I worked really hard to make my life easier, so I was less likely to be what I was. That's what I did.
Fair enough.
And it seemed to work. I didn't mean to interrupt you though, but I had to go.
You're good. That was pretty much everything I had to say.
All right.
Well, that's awesome. I appreciate everybody for being here today. I appreciate the audience for coming. Again, like, subscribe. Don't leave me hanging.